there. It is story time. Story time. Genesis 24, story time. Time to talk about some things going on in Genesis chapter 24. Let me move this over here a little bit. That's happening. I didn't somehow get that all straight before. Okay. Hi. Hi, Smashing the Patriarchy. It's fun to see you. Oh, these are probably going to be distracting, aren't they? Let me take those off. I'm live, so can't chat right now. Oh my god. Hi. So let's try that again. Okay, so we're reading the story from Genesis 24 today. And there are a couple things I'd like to highlight for you. One is the language in most translations refers to the person who goes that Abraham sends on their behalf. He calls him a servant in my English translation. I haven't looked at other translations, but it's slave. This person is a slave, an enslaved person. Second of all, I'd like you to think about the amount of conversation that takes place between men in this chapter. Third, it is a fairly long chapter. It's the longest story that we have in the biblical storyline about the way this took place, the way this kind of a thing happened when a man sent someone to go find a woman for his son, right? So it is, it's the most drawn out. It's all kinds of things. So there's something nice about that in terms of reading the story. You get kind of a more full picture of what's going on. The next version of it we get is when Jacob goes looking for himself, and it's kind of a shortened version a little bit. There's this other element of what's happening here in terms of what's happening at a well. So we have animals being watered and all these things are taking place at a well scene. And it happens for Rebekah. It also happens for Rachel. And it becomes a trope. It becomes a thing that we see in literature, or a thing that it becomes a symbolic kind of a thing, not just a location, but water, spring of life, that kind of thing. So that when we get to the Newer Testament and you have this encounter between Jesus and a woman at a well, if you're a Jew, you're a good Jew, you've been trained well by your scriptures, like you're thinking of some sort of marriage. We're thinking of partnership here. We're thinking he's looking for a woman, right? I mean, that's an honest response to have in relation to this story, because of this story and because of the one with Jacob. And okay, so a little bit distracted today. Got some interesting things going on in the background. So I'm sorry if I'm not being succinct here. So this stands in as a really important story in lots of ways, right? Okay, most drawn out. It becomes kind of an archetype, if you want, whatever you want to call it, right? This is a thing that happens. I was in a hurry from my lipstick on. Okay, so, and of course, I'd like you to think about how Rebekah behaves in this story. I'd like you to think about how few lines she's given. Did she have any alternative offers? She seems to be really excited about this adventure or this particular situation. Of course, right? Because what are her options? So there are all kinds of things I think to think about here. I am most interested, again, in inviting you to reflect on what this tells us about this relationship called marriage. I'm not interested in critiquing the practice of arranged marriages. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I do think it's worth people being very, very aware of the fact that this is a form of an arranged marriage. And do you think about your own faith tradition being built upon arranged marriages? That is a form of biblical marriage. That is a part of your scriptures, if these are your scriptures. This is a part of the way the people of Israel, the Jew, the Israelite people came to be. That's so this foundation for Judaism, Islam, and Christianity is built on arranged marriages. Okay. Marriages. So I'd like you thinking about those kinds of things here, right? Um, and of course, we're going to continue to see the same elements of what women are most important for. There's also, when so I'm trying to bring this conversation about marriage in the Bible and a more complex engagement around what the Bible says about marriage. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do here. Um, it's also, what the book is that I have coming out in a few months. That's what it is about, marriage in the Bible. What do the texts say? Like, let's be honest with what they say. I just lost my train of thought. What is being said about marriage? Oh, right. Because, people today like to say things like a biblical marriage is between one man and one woman. We've already seen that isn't true, right? We've already seen that Abraham's marriage included, like Abraham's life included having sex with the enslaved woman in their house. That's not just one man, one woman. Um, and then that people also like to say that procreation is for marriage, and they say that based on Genesis 2:24, which again I think is, or I guess Genesis 1:28, which I think is also a misreading and a misunderstanding, a mishandling of Genesis 1. But also we've already seen in Abraham himself that that's not true, right? Because there's procreation happening under one roof, but it's not just within marriage. It's not just between the man and his wife. In fact, it's between the man and, not Abraham, but like Lamech has two women, right? So it's two women, but then Abraham has an enslaved woman producing a child for him, right? This is just the patriarch, like the main guy, right? These things are like a part of his story, and he forces himself upon Hagar, right? So that's rape, right? This is a part of how we get this whole tradition, is out of this ancient context where this way of dealing with humans is just okay, and that needs to be taken into consideration, because that means that's going to be spread throughout all of the scriptures, all of the stories. Is this kind of a general mindset or worldview from which they're starting? Okay, which is dramatically different from ours, but we need to be conscientious of that starting point first, I think. So people like to say that marriage is, today is something that equals enter into and they choose to, right? And it's built on love. Well, I'd like to invite you to take very seriously how love plays out in any of these marriages. None of them so far have been talked about as involving marriage. And please do not get me wrong. A commitment to a person is love, right? It can be a form of love without calling it that. But you know what I mean? So I get I get that love itself is complex. But when we look at what's happening here, do you really think that Rebekah is excited about this encounter? For the reasons that you might be when you meet someone you want to marry, or whatever, however that plays out. So those are just things I want to put out there up front, before I get into the story, so that you have it bumping around in your head as I read the story. And it is a bit of a long one. And so I'm just going to read and pause if there's something really important I want to highlight, and I'm just going to read through the story. And this really is going to be more like story time, since this is a bit of a story. So just going to read through, pausing if necessary. So Genesis chapter 24, and I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version, which is, if I actually say something different from what's here, like if they say wife and all that stuff, I'm going to say woman, and I'll raise my hand to let you know that I'm diverging from what this is saying. So, okay. Now, Abraham was old and well advanced in years. Sometimes Sometimes I don't even notice these redundancies, and then I do, and it makes me giggle. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham said to his slave, the oldest of his house, who had charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not get a woman for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but will go to my country and to my kindred to get a woman for my son Isaac. You shall not get one of these Canaanite people," right? The slave said to him, "Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there." We could ask questions about that, couldn't we? "The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and swore to me, 'To your offspring I will give this land,' he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a woman for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there." I do think it's really interesting. I didn't look it up ahead of time, but I'm fairly certain that we have the word Isha in this verse used twice. And in one case, Isha is translated as wife, and in one case, it's woman. It's kind of like the epitome of and having influence using your translation. So if she's not willing to follow you, then you're free from this oath. Just don't take my son back to that homeland, whatever. So the slave put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. I mean, I hope when I'm doing this, that's because I'm saying slave, but my English says servant, just so we're clear. I think it's really interesting the way translation committees choose to tone down the intensity or the rawness of these stories, of these scriptures, just to make it more palatable to current people. I think, why are they doing that? Why aren't they showing us how raw it is, so that we could have a more honest conversation about what this content says before deciding what to do with it? Okay. Then the slave took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all kinds of choice gifts from his master. And he set out and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water. It was toward evening, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, "Oh, Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. I'm standing here by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water." So here the slave is narrating to God what's happening, right? "Let the girl to whom I shall say, 'Please offer your jar that I may drink,' and who shall say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one whom you have appointed for your slave Isaac." That might actually be a different form. I didn't look that up, so I'm not sure if that's actually your slave Isaac or your servant Isaac, just to be clear. "By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master." So the dude is essentially dictating to God what needs to transpire in order for him to know that this is really who he's supposed to take. I just think it's really fascinating, don't you? Anyway, I mean, it's a little bit like asking God to provide a parking space for you or something when you get downtown, and that you take it as a sign. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. Before he had finished speaking, there was Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah. Bethuel took Milcah, his niece, right? Sorry, Bethuel is the son of Milcah. Milcah was the wife of Nahor. Nahor and Milcah were originally uncle-niece relationship, right? And so then Nahor took her, and they had a child. They had a couple children together, and one was Bethuel. So, and Nahor is Abraham's brother, right? So Abraham's own niece is also his sister-in-law. Okay, just so we're clear about all these family relations, because this is marriage in the Bible, right? Let's just be very clear about it. Okay. There was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder. The girl was very fair to look upon, right? How old is she, right? Of yeah, oh, wow, I didn't look this up ahead of time. My apologies. A virgin whom no man had known, which is, redundancy, because I have a whole thing about the term virgin. Okay, so I'm making a note to put connect that video, terminology video virgin. Yeah, I mean the term virgin is really only a term. It's a term initially in the biblical context, at least. It only applies to females. That's a thing to consider. We tend to today apply it to all people, to refer to any kind of sexual experience, whether or not a person has had any. But in the biblical context, it's very specific. It's about a female body who has not been penetrated by a man's penis. I mean, that's what it is. That's what a virgin is. And what goes along with that is this misunderstanding of female body, of like physiology of bodies, specifically that hymens do not have to be torn the first time a female is penetrated, but that typically it is because of the non-mutuality involved in this coming together, or the lack of sensitivity to the female body, which is all that it takes. A little bit of preparation, a little bit of sensitivity, a little bit of gentleness. A woman doesn't actually have to bleed the first time she's penetrated, but that's typically how it plays out, because that's how people have done it or thought about it. And so the fact, right, that a woman should be able to show the evidence that she had been a virgin, right? That's a biblical concept that is still a concept alive and well today, that a woman should tear and therefore bleed the first time she's penetrated, which is just a misunderstanding of human physiology, and is actually thus a form of violence against a woman's body. So this category of virgin itself, this label and category, is based on violence to a woman's body. I'd like you to sit with that for a minute, okay? It also goes hand in hand with this concept that women's bodies were there for men, okay? It also goes hand in hand with this concept that the primary purpose of a woman was to give a man sex. We see that in Judges 11. I've been reading through that with my online students, and going over the homework. And one of many questions, so it's not the primary thing, but one of the questions I ask is, are you paying attention to why it's a problem that this young woman like what they're mourning? Well, they're mourning not that she's dying, but that she's dying without serving her purpose, which is to give a man sex. It's just fascinating how deep and interconnected it all is around this concept of a young woman being a virgin, not having been touched by a man. It's kind of like the Fiji water, not touched by a man, right? Pure. Okay. Did anybody track with that commercial reference I just made? Many women in the Bible would marry into slavery to improve their conditions. Oh, goodness. I will maybe come back to that, Supreme Scientist. I am appreciative of the question, and we'll see if we can. Context usage of virgin seems like it's a bit off, like it was a reference to less physical aspect. Okay, I'm gonna have to come back to that. But I just want to know if you all are, yeah. Okay, good. You're tracking. Okay, good. Sorry, I got distracted. Well, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. That's the whole point of doing this, is to kind of give you all some of this stuff that I don't think people talk about. And it is also something I discuss in my book, if you're interested in the book itself. But it is something that I talk about in the chapter on terminology. But anyway, so let's back up briefly. The girl was very fair to look upon, a virgin whom no man had known, right? That euphemism for having had sex with, really, for having had sex done to her, right? Because men do things to women. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Then the slave ran to meet her and said, "Please, let me sip a little water from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord," and quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw for your camels also until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough, and ran again to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Isn't that nice of her? Very hospitable, one might say, as we've been discussing about these ancient people and their practices, right? The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. I mean, it is kind of funny, right? He literally dictated to God just 5 seconds ago what needed to happen in order for this to be like what he's supposed to do. And then it all happens, so he's just pondering, is this really it? Okay. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took, pay attention to this, a gold nose ring weighing a half shekel. I got to be honest, I don't know what these weights mean. I don't even really care. I just know that it's something and it's making an impression on me in some way. A nose ring weighing a half shekel, and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and said, "Tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." I love the way they do that. Like, oh, okay. She added, "We have plenty of straw and fodder and a place to spend the night." The man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the way to the house of my master's kin." Like the men get so many more lines than the women do. It's just fascinating, isn't it? And it's really about her, but the whole story is written and narrated as if it's about the men. Just something to think about. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban will end up being the father of Rachel and Leah one day, right? And Laban, so Rebekah's brother, ran out to the man, to the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah, "Thus the man spoke to me," he went to the man, and there he was, standing by the camels at the spring. He said, "Come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside when I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man, the slave, right, came into the house, and Laban unloaded the camels and gave him straw and fodder for the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Then food was set before him to eat. But he said, "I will not eat until I have told my errand." So Laban said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's slave. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, Abraham, and he has become wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys." I mean, we could comment about this, couldn't we? We could pause and comment on how that happened in Egypt when he basically, deceived Pharaoh to get all this stuff. We could comment on that. Or we could take it as the way they made sense of that is to say the Lord blessed him. But however you want to look at that, that's his same list, though, that he was given in Egypt, right? For his little trickery there. Okay, the Lord has greatly blessed my master. He's become wealthy, given him all these things. And Sarah, my master's woman, bore a son to my master when she was old. And he has given him all that he has. We're getting all confused with the pronoun usage here. But anyway, Abraham has given Isaac all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, "You shall not take a woman for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a woman for my son." So I'm doing this because my English says wife and I'm saying woman, right? Just to bring that to your attention. How many times that happens. I said to my master, "Perhaps the woman will not follow me." But he said to me, "The Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and make your way successful. You shall get a woman for my son from my kindred, from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my kindred. Even if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath." So we just repeated the whole exchange that took place earlier on, right? between Abraham and his slave. And now he's repeating it to them to verify, I suppose, right? This is all legit. And he continues, I came today to the spring and said, Oh Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will only make me successful the way I am going. I'm standing here by the spring of water. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart to the Lord, right, there was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I asked her, Whose daughter are you? And she said, The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. I claimed her as ours, right? Is what he's saying. Then I bowed my head and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you will deal loyally and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so that I may turn either to the right hand or to the left. So the slave has come and done what he'd been told to do. He's already narrated. So we heard it narrated for us. Then he retells the whole scene again with Rebekah. Then Laban, so this is Rebekah's brother, right? Laban and Bethuel answered, her brother and her father, The thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak to you anything bad or good. Look, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the woman of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. It's interesting, isn't it? This is all God's doing. We can't speak against it or in favor. It just has to happen, right? Clearly, this all went down precisely as as you said, because the Lord deemed it that way. I mean, it's kind of worth asking, isn't that really what would happen anyway? If a woman sees a stranger at the well and she would offer him something to drink, and the graciousness and the hospitality, right, of this people, right? That's what would happen. But anyway, okay. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. When Abraham's slave heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. And the slave brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. So he already gave her some jewelry, and then he gives her some more, right? Jewelry and some garments in front of the family. And then he gives the rest of the family some ornaments, some more fine things. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they rose in the morning, he said, Send me back to my master. Her brother and her mother said, Let the girl remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go. But he said to them, Do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey successful. Let me go, that I may go to my master. They said, We will call the girl and ask her. Wow, she gets a say in this, huh? And they called Rebekah and said to her, Will you go with this man? She said, I will. So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse along with Abraham's slave and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, and this is in poetic form in the translation. So it's either like a form of a poem or a song or a blessing that, kind of was a thing that people said or did, right? May you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. Okay. Then Rebekah, do we need a comment on this? May you, our sister, become that. Yes, may you be fruitful, right? Because that's a good thing in their world. I'm not, it's a good thing. But I just always find it interesting the many ways that violence and antagonism, conquering and competitiveness come into biblical scriptures. Just so many different ways, right? May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes. I mean, I just it just makes me cranky, really. Really? Do we have to do that? Anyway, then Rebekah and her maids rose up, mounted the camels, and followed the man. Thus the slave took Rebekah and went his way. So yeah, bummer, right? Her whole family just to say goodbye to her. They wanted 10 days to say goodbye, Nope, we don't get that. It's a bummer, huh? Now, Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roy and was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and said to the slave, "Who is the man over there walking in the field to meet us?" The slave said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. I read a really interesting article about this. It's not essential, I don't think, but it is interesting. Why was she covering herself, And the slave, told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. So Sarah's already dead, right? He brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his woman, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. I'm trying to let that just be a sweet moment, right? These two she was purchased for him. He knows that he's going to do the best he can for her. I'm just trying to give this the best angle possible here, right? We can see this as a sweet gesture and moment, but it is really fascinating, right? The slave comes back from his trip with a woman. So Isaac knows that's for him, right? She's for him. And I'm just going to say, give it the best spin. He was kind to her and he was grateful for her. He might have been really good looking, and that's why I don't know, like she saw a young, swarthy young man coming at her. I don't know. I'm just trying to play it up, And he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. I mean, that's one of the roles of a life partner, is to comfort you when you're mourning. But notice there's no ceremony here. We do not have a wedding ceremony. Stop doing that. No wedding ceremony going on, right? Just there she is. She's been purchased for me. I'm going to take her into the tent and mark my property right now, right? I'm going to have sex with her. She is mine, right? He took Rebekah and she became his woman. The English is wife. She became his woman, meaning he had sex with her. That is how we know she is his. He has marked his territory. And we did see that Rebekah is game to go along with this. Like I said, she didn't have many options, right? But this was 67 verses. And it's really about Rebekah and Isaac, but the whole story is about this narration of God's hand in the process, right? And, Rebekah stepping into the story as precisely as the slave had asked or predicted or whatever. So this is the longest one we have. Okay, no pay, no play. All right, let me go back. There was a question or comment. Okay, let me read some of these comments real quick. Tanakh says Isaac's woman, I'm just going to say that, had to be worthy successor like Sarah, a matriarch. Matriarch is defined as the leader of the family. Wasn't Sarah humiliated by Abraham? Okay, right. Dr. Bird, a Christian apologist told me that many women in the Bible would marry into slavery to improve their condition in society. Is this true? Well, I would like to know the passage or the situation they're referring to, because um, because what we see happening is we see a narrative, right, that is patriarchally defined, and it is a story for men by men, right? Men benefit from it. We see women and children being, widowed or orphaned or whatever, after war, after battles, and then the conquering men will go in and take and claim those women, and they become theirs, whether they are usually a form of like a concubine. They're, side pieces. They're not proper wives, as they might be secondary or there as for sexual pleasure, for sexual purposes. So when I see, and I know that this isn't your premise, you're just referring to something someone said, but when you say that women would marry into slavery to improve their condition, I'm not sure what they're getting at. Like, I'm not sure where the person who said that to you, where they get that idea. And part of what happens, and I know because I've heard some apologists say this, that if those men hadn't enslaved the women and taken them into their general care, then the women would have died on their own or something, which is a little bit offensive and insulting, right? Because women are just as driven to survive as men are, and women will find a way to survive, even if it is not with a man. But we're getting the story through the lens of men. So we might be getting the story in a way that makes that if you're taught to read with the grain of the story, right? Read positivistically, then you're going to internalize that this is what needed to happen or the women would have died. Does that make sense, Supreme Scientist? So, I was a part of a panel. There were 5 of us, 5 biblical scholars, who did a panel on slavery in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, so both testaments. And that was one of the things we talked about, is that the way people very casually throw that out there, that women would, it's better for them to be claimed or to be raped and taken or whatever, all these awful things. I'm like, I'm not sure that people who make those claims have ever sat with the implications of what they're saying. So please, I'm not quite down at the bottom yet. So come back to me if that didn't actually address your comment or your question fully. Wash his feet, traditionally a woman's job, correct? Actually, washing the feet is a slave's job. So whoever that role that falls to, I don't necessarily think that's necessarily a woman's slave. So I can't actually comment beyond that. Yes, putting their hand under the thigh. It's a really interesting scene, right? Put your hand under my thigh. I mean, is that literally just under the thigh? Is it? Why are men so focused on their jewels? Is putting your hand under the thigh I'm going to be really super vulnerable with you? I don't get that. I need to read on that. I should read up on that. I don't know what that's all about. Is it, my balls are resting right there? I don't know what that is. Does anyone have any reference scholarship, like solid scholarship, on what the deal is with the hand under the thigh? Because that just makes me so weirdly uncomfortable for some reason. Man, you guys and your preoccupation with the stuff on the outside, that y'all need to give it a chill. Give it a chill. The ring and bracelets, I can't think of any imagery that shows this. Do we understand the traditions? Well, the positioning. Yeah, it's just, what Egyptian positioning. I don't, cool bracelets up here. I don't know. Anyway, I want to barf for all the times the story is told. Yeah. And wow, how nice that she gets brought into the good family. Exactly. Giving birth to warlords is like a crackpot. Okay, this is so funny. Okay. Yeah, gain possession of the gates of your foes. Exactly. Thank you. Right? What is this? Why are we doing this? Why are we blessing people and saying, go be a good conqueror over your enemies? Why is that a thing? Okay. Okay. If, I, thank you, Nitty. Right? Like, I didn't comment on it because I just wanted to say it. But he takes his newfound woman, like the woman just purchased for him, and he goes and has sex in his mother's bed. Like, what the hell? What kind of weird, right? Like, we need all of these men need therapy. That's what I'm going to say. All of these men need therapy. He takes his woman into his mother's bedroom to have sex with her. Like, these people it scares me how many of these men, yes, groin region, yes, hand under the thigh, groin region in some way. But right, what it go back to the whole point of when we read a story that someone is telling, it tells us, it tells us as much about the person telling the story as it does about whatever issue it is they're trying to address, right? So we have all of these storytellers in the Hebrew Bible and writers in the Newer Testament. It's not just Hebrew Bible. We have all these writers who just get hung up on and really need to make a thing about certain behaviors or practices or rituals, and a focus on the men's penis and circumcision. It's just so fascinating to me the way that comes up. And I had some people asking interesting questions about Ham with his father's, his father's nakedness. Was that because someone did say in a comment, which is totally appropriate, a woman is actually called the nakedness of her man, right? So when Ham saw his father's nakedness, did that actually mean, Noah being naked, or did it mean a reference to seeing his mother, Ham seeing his mother naked? All kinds of stuff. And all of it is fascinating because it's based upon a premise of women being property of men, right? Okay. All kinds of great things. All these many, yeah, I'm glad you, oh, Abby, hi, I'm glad you made it. Yeah, they do. They all need therapy. And yes, women did, where did that come from? Oh, anyway. So is the God of Abraham mostly his ego God? Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Where else do these claims come from, right? Abraham heard a voice telling him to go do these great things and to take this whole swath of land. Well, of course. Where does that come from? We're either going to say he's actually crazy and hearing voices, and we need to, check him in. And by the way, when I make a reference to any sort of thing that, like, if I make a reference to hearing voices, I don't actually mean to be dismissive or even judgmental of people who hear voices. That is not my intent at all. I actually think we should take that very seriously and respect the human being who is dealing with that. Okay. But we have 2 or 3 important men in the Christian Bible who talk openly about hearing voices, right? Abraham talks openly of having a conversation with God. Paul talks about it. And Jesus kind of talks about it a little bit, right? But anyway, and there are probably some others in the mix as well, but I'm just saying, in this case, Abraham tells us over and over, or the story tells us, that God spoke to Abraham, God spoke to Moses, God spoke to so-and-so, right? God speaks to Joshua, all these men. Are they hearing a voice? Or is it just they had this epiphany, they had this revelation, or this idea? They had an idea. They wanted to go do a thing. Just say that. No, it's way more powerful if you can say, God told me to do this, right? I think we all get that. But your point or your comment, whichever it was, question, comment, point, really kind of drives it home, Jay and I, right? That people don't actually, it took me, I couldn't have said this, what I just said for the last 30 seconds. I couldn't have said that 15 years ago. I could have said it 15, but not when I was in my 20s. I couldn't have said that because I believed it. I believed the scriptures when they said that God spoke to Abraham. I believed that God actually spoke to Abraham. I hadn't even stopped to consider that that was just a really great, just an idea that Abraham had. And there are, 4,000 years or so of tradition based on that premise that God spoke to Abraham. I'm going to give you and your descendants this particular swath of land, and I'm going to make you numerous, and I'm going to, right, and all these things. And so I come from a tradition that honored those claims as actually coming from God. So it took some time for me to be able to question the validity of that claim, that it actually came from God, right? And then to be able to say, well, if it just was his idea, then doesn't that mean it's up for debate or it's up for being challenged? And yes, it is up for being challenged because whatever its intentions and purposes were, 3,500 years ago or so, it served a purpose then. Not trying to challenge that. It did serve a purpose. It helped bring about cohesion and community and a form of an identity. But it also has been the cause of those promises given to Abraham by God have been the cause of a great deal of harm to millions of people over the centuries. So I think it does us all some good if we can be able to take a step back and see what's happening in terms of the narrative and then also critique it for it's just a story. There was no God behaving this way, but it's a belief in a God, and it's like a placeholder, You ascribe it to your God as a way of justifying your claims and your beliefs, or even helping you stay focused, for instance. So thank you, Nitty. Yeah. I mean, I wish you all could see his comment because I don't want to read them all. But I think you're right, Nitty. I just think I'm trying to figure out why Abraham would have his own slave, why they would make a pact based on Abraham's own sensitive body parts, right? Right. So I don't know what that tradition is all about. I'll try to look that up. Well, yes, the fear of God, but Abraham is the one who's being vulnerable, and he's the one giving his slave the challenge. Is why I'm confused. I will look it up. I'll go look up the thigh thing, see what I can come up with. Okay. All right. What else? What else do we need to talk about? Genesis 24. It's all about the men, even though this whole story is about giving Isaac a woman, an Isha, so that they can perpetuate the family line. It's all about the men. It's a story all about the men, and the men like to retell their stories and tell their stories and retell, Rebekah isn't, she gets a couple lines. She features a couple times with some action, but the whole thing is about the slave telling the story and retelling the story and interacting with men and purchasing a woman and offering gifts to the family, right? So she's being purchased. She's being taken from her family to give to Isaac. Anything else? Thank you, Pragmatic Crystal. And we will keep moving on then. Keep moving. We've got to, again, these are stories that involve sex, the relationships we call marriage, and any sort of physical abuse that involves intimate body parts or genitalia. So that we can talk about it, see it for what's going on in those texts, so that sometimes it can give us a bit of a purchase for talking about them more honestly in our own contexts, help us to see it in our own context, or give us a reason to see part of why these ideas are still present in our cultures, right? That these are ancient ideas that are being modeled for us, and many people are told to not ask critical questions, not engage critical thinking when they read them. And so people are perpetuating some of these examples, even if they're not conscious of it, right? So there are many reasons to be this level of critical about scripture, about the text we call the Bible. They are still being read on a daily basis around the world, right? And on a weekly basis in Jewish contexts and Christian contexts, right? Around the world every week. So there are reasons to do this. Thanks for showing up. Oh, there's another comment about virgin, which caught my eye. I think the story using the term virgin is to establish that she's special. Well, yeah, just to be clear, anytime you refer to a female as a virgin, it means that she hasn't been soiled. She hasn't been tainted. No other man has tried to have sex with her, which means in their world view, no other man has left his semen behind in her that could grow into a child, because they seemed to think that it was all about a man's semen. That's all that needed to happen, and that the woman was like an incubator. So yes, when you say that, when you call her that, it is to say she's She hasn't been spoiled. Has not been touched. That language, as awful as it is, I mean it as awful as it sounds, right? You're the first one who gets to tap that one, right? That's what they're saying for sure. So you know that any children she might have are going to be yours. I mean, it's all of those things. And there are plenty of biblical passages that tell the listeners, primarily males, that any female who's already had sex is tainted goods. That is very much. I mean, we look at when we get into the Levitical laws and the laws talking about what priests should and shouldn't do, a priest cannot marry any woman who has ever been married before, because she would have had sex. A priest can only marry a virgin. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's just awful. Most men only want a virgin, but priests really can only marry virgins because they are pure, right? Long segue there about the biblical scholarship that tells us to look at the language around purity as ritual purity, and yet there's this whole trove of biblical passages talking about sexual purity or impurity, and it specifically applies to women, and we're not even talking about that as an actual thing, and just so many things going on here. So there's a chapter in my book on terminology, called it's all about terminology. I don't even remember the name, something like that. It's all about terminology, and it might sound like a boring chapter, but it's actually really interesting stuff to stop and think about how the language, even if it's being translated accurately, right? This label of virginity or virgin, it's a made up construct. It's not even a real thing. Like, being a virgin is literally just that you haven't been penetrated by a penis. It is heteronormative, heterocentric, right? And it doesn't really mean anything. And it's based on this premise that a woman will bleed the first time she's penetrated, which is based on doing violence to a woman's body. So the label category virgin is about violence to women's bodies. Full stop. Yeah, that's a great note to end on. Let's end on that. Okay. I'm going to, because that's kind of how I feel today. All right. We will move on to the next chapter. There's plenty of things to talk about tomorrow in Genesis 25. And I think I already have the little prompt up and ready to go for tomorrow. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening later if you're watching it after the live. And it's really lovely to get to do this. I'm having a great time. I hope some of you are getting something out of it as well. Thanks. I will see you tomorrow.